This is just basically more of the same thing. The only difference here is that you don't have just two terms, you have three or more terms with these problems. In the other ones you were doing up here, you only had two terms. And down here, you've got three or more terms. It's the same rules. You look at your signs. In this problem, all the signs are the same, so I know my answer is positive. Then you look at your numbers. You try to figure out what your number is going to be. Well, there's an understood 1 to be in front of this x, so this is going to be 1 times 2, and 2 times 3 is 6. And then I look at the variables. Well, since the x's are the same, I'm going to add the exponents. That's going to come out to be x to the third. That's an ugly 3. X to the third. That's my answer. Here I've got an even number of negatives, so I know my answer is going to be positive, so my sign's positive. Now I've got to figure out my numbers. Well, there's an understood 1 to be here in front of this there's a 1 coefficient for the x squared y cubed. So 2 times 1 times 15. 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 times 15 is 30. Now I look at my variables. I've got an x squared, an x squared here, and then another x here. Okay, so I'm going to add those exponents. 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. X to the fifth. Then I have a y here, and a y here. Well, 3 plus 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5, so this becomes y to the fifth. And I have a and b by themselves. A, B. Since there's no other a's and b's, there's no other exponents to add them to. I'm going to write this in alphabetical order. 30 AB x to the fifth y to the fifth. Okay, here we've got an odd number of negative signs. 1, 2, 3. 3 is an odd number. So I know my answer is going to be negative. Once I know my sign, I move on to try to figure out my numbers. I've got 8 times 3 is 24, or 8 times 2 is 16. 16 times 3 is 48. So my number is going to be 48. Now I'm going to look at the variables. I've got an a squared here, an a here, and an a squared here. Well, a squared plus a to the first is going to be a to the third, and a to the third plus a to the second is a to the fifth. Then here I have b squared, b to the first, and b squared. So the 2 plus 2 is 4, and plus 1 is 5, so that gives me b to the fifth. That's my answer there. Here I've got an even number of negatives. 1, 2. 2 is an even number, so I know my answer is going to be positive. Now that I know my sign, I'm going to figure out my numbers, right? 4 times 10 is 40, and 40 times 25, I don't know what that is. Let me look it up on my calculator. 40 times 25 is 1,000. So I know my sign is positive, my number is going to be 1,000. Now that I've got my sign and my number, I'm going to look at my variables. A cubed, or a to the third, plus a to the second, and then this is going to be a 1 and a 1. So I just add. 3 plus 2 is 5, plus 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7. It's a to the 7th. And then I've got b's. B, B, B. This is b to the fourth, b to the second, and b to the first. So 4 plus 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. That's b to the 7th. That's my answer there. I've got 2 negative signs. That's an even number. 2 is even, so I know my answer is going to be positive. And I've got my numbers. There's a 1 understood to be here. So 1 times 6 is 6. 6 times 4 is 24. And 24 times 2 is 48. Now I'm going to look at my variables. I'm going to start off by multiplying my a's. and adding the exponents. A times a squared is a to the third, because that's a 2. There's an understood 1 to be there. So that's a to the third plus 1 is a to the fourth. Now I'm going to look at my b's. B squared is b to the fourth, b to the fifth, b to the sixth. Right? 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. That's my answer for 15. I've got 1, 2, 3 negatives, so that's an odd number of negatives. So I know my answer is going to be negative. Now that I know my sign, I'm going to figure out what my numbers equal. 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 times 4 is 36. So I know my number is 36. Now I'm going to add up my variables. A to the third times a to the first is a to the fourth. Right? 3 plus 1 is 4. Then x times x is x squared, and x squared times x squared is x to the fourth. There's my answer. I just keep doing the same process over and over again. I figure out my sign. Well, since this is a positive and this is a negative, that means the signs are different. So I know my answer is going to be negative. I figure out my sign. Then I figure out my number. 12 times 3 is 36. And then I figure out the variables. Well, since there's no x to multiply with, there's no y to multiply with, the x's and the y's stay the same. X squared, y squared. Same thing. All the signs are positive, so I know my answer is positive. 45 times 1 is 45, and 45 times 1 is 45. So my number is going to be 45. Then I look at my variables. X to the first times x to the third equals x to the fourth. And y to the third times y equals y to the fourth. And I think that's it. That's it. Let's see. What does it say here? It says, notice, let's see. Have you noticed that monomials do not have to be like terms in order to be multiplied together? Yeah, we have noticed that. Actually, I pointed that out at the very beginning, that the rules for multiplication are different than the rules for addition of monomials. Okay, remember that. For you to be able to combine monomials in addition and subtraction, the monomials have to be like terms. For you to be able to combine them in multiplication, it doesn't matter if they're like terms or not. All you've got to do is just multiply and add the exponents of like variables.